Hey, it's Adam here, and you're watching The Culture Hack, where we're talking about how to create engaged workspaces that unlock the potential of your teams and drive your business forward in ways you've never seen. So stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to a special episode of The Culture Hack. I am beyond excited to have Alex Sarian online with me. He is the CEO of Arts Commons, and it was a shot in the dark to try and get him to come on and talk to me, but he very generously agreed. So Alex, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
So tell us a little about Arts Commons. I mean, I don't think there's a person in the city that hasn't heard the name Arts Commons, but tell us what you're all about.
So you'd be surprised how many people don't know that Calgary is home to one of the largest performing arts centers in North America. Arts Commons is the largest arts center in Western Canada, the third largest in the nation. And we are a 560,000 square foot facility dedicated to arts and culture and the performing arts. We have 6 theaters. We have resident companies that range from Theatre Calgary to the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra to Alberta Theatre Projects. So we are a home to a lot of arts and culture activity within downtown Calgary.
It's amazing. And I can speak from personal experience because I've attended the National Geographic live presentations for years, and it's amazing the kind of the knowledge and the all the things that you're doing with all the arts programs. So very excited. I'm a huge fan as well.
Thank you.
But we're here to talk about engagement, and what a opportunity to pick your brain, because you're not only have a team that you're engaging and working with, but you're working through the arts to engage an entire city. So when you talk about engaging from this perspective, like what does that mean to you?
So for me, engagement through the lens of the work that we do at Arts Commons is really about listening to community and listening to communities that surround us and that should have access to these opportunities. I think for too long, arts organizations have positioned themselves as these arbiters of excellence, meaning, well, if Arts Commons has put it on their stage, it means it must be good, as opposed to us asking the question to people, how do you define culture? How do you celebrate culture? And how can we be a home wherein your culture is celebrated as defined by you? And so we're going from, this is the perfect analogy. Historically, people would ask, what's the impact of an arts organization on the city that surrounds it? The question that I'm trying to ask now is, what is the impact of Calgary on Arts Commons? So how do we flip the script so that it's not about the impact that Arts Commons has on Calgary, but how do we measure success by the impact that Calgary has on us? Because if we were to do that, then all of a sudden, people walking downtown, walking by Arts Commons, walking by Olympic Plaza, all of a sudden have a completely different relationship to what we do and to what we have on stage, because they see themselves engaged and they see themselves reflected in who we are becoming. So I think there's a lot to unpack about engagement. Historically, engagement has been seen as this and you can call it the white savior complex, you can call it whatever you want, but normally engagement has been seen on, well, what's the organization doing for community as opposed to what is the organization doing with community? And if we're doing it with community, how are we then changing as a result of it?
Interesting. So it's not, what can I do for you? It's what can we do together? What can you do for me? Like, well, how can we grow together into
Well, what
something?
can we do? But I mean, it is what can we do for you, but
Yeah.
actually then listening and being open to what people say. And, I spoke earlier about just how big Arts Commons is physically, but there's another way of measuring how big we are, which is by the number of events we can host. So Arts Commons, when all of our theaters and venues are firing on all cylinders, we have the ability to host 2,000 events per year. And historically, over the past 40 years that we've been around, I'd venture to say that our 2,000 events per year would probably go after the same 50,000 Calgarians.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes no sense. And if we continue that, we will be out of business. And so we have a responsibility, not just to the communities within Calgary, but to our own survival as an organization, to say, how are we taking that inventory of 2,000 events per year, or that pie, and making sure that we have enough slices for everybody, because each one of those slices, if I can take the analogy to the next level, each one of those slices is a relationship we're building with communities that have historically not had access to us. And if we can build those relationships and ask the question, what can we do for you? And truly mean the question and be open to the answer, then all of a sudden we have 2,000 events per year that are being accessed by so many different communities and so many more people that have historically felt like they had access to the arts.
So have you been getting answers back
Yeah,
from the community?
so there are a couple of, I mean, I'll let you in on a couple of different like sort of secrets. Um, One of the things that we did when I first got here in 2020, and the pandemic hit and we couldn't gather people inside, but one of the first programs we launched was a program called Arts Expedition. And it was a series of pop-up concerts around the four quadrants of Calgary. And at face value, it was, we want to bring the arts to the people. But when you peel back the layers, it was actually far more intentional and far more strategic. We were doing these pop-up concerts in communities that didn't necessarily come to us before, and we can track that because we have data on who buys tickets and where their household is. And so we can look at a heat map of Calgary and say most of our patrons come from these neighborhoods or these regions. And so for us, the Arts Expedition series was an intentional effort in building relationships with communities on their terms and on their turf,
Hmm.
and creating these opportunities in their backyard. Now, it wasn't just about sending random arts into these communities. If and when available, we would find local artists within these neighborhoods to perform within their community for their neighbors under the umbrella of Arts Commons. And that to me is such a beautiful manifestation of Arts Commons being the facilitator between an artist that lived in a community and neighbors that might not have known that that existed there. So we spent those, I think over the past 2 years, we've exceeded over 200 concerts in all of the four quadrants of Calgary. That's us going out into the city and building relationships with communities, as I said, on their turf and on their terms. And then, if we're successful, we can then reciprocate and say, hey, I want to return the generosity and hospitality that you showed us. And why don't you come to Arts Commons as we reopen and as we deal with post-pandemic? So, the art that the other side to that coin is, we last summer, even though it was sort of pandemic or post-pandemic, last summer was the busiest summer on record for Arts Commons in our 40-year history.
Really?
Yeah, and the reason why is because we actually partnered with a promoter of Southeast Asian artists. And we learned that there was a touring route across Canada that was touring these amazing contemporary Southeast Asian artists, and they were doing Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, and then they would skip to go to Vancouver. And we said, well, what happens if they stop in Calgary? And so from May of September of 2022, we did like a 13 concert series at Arts Commons featuring these artists. And all of a sudden, the Northeast community of Calgary that we had been trying to invest in building relationships with, they came to downtown Calgary and they came to Arts Commons like they've never come before. And my thesis is that never would have happened if we hadn't built those relationships. And we continue to learn. So, a lot of these concerts, the artists don't just like to do 2-hour sets. They'll do a 4-hour, 5-hour concert if the spirit moves them. So all of a
Hmm.
sudden we have to learn how to do things differently. If our back of house team now is doing a 5-hour show, and if it's a 5-hour show and people are coming with their families and want to have lunch and bring a picnic, and if they want to go and sit in the park and then re-enter the facility, so we're having to learn how to do things in completely different ways, and we're learning because these are communities that are important to us. And it's not about them having to fit the mold of who we want them to be. It's about us learning how to be a place of gathering for them.
Hmm. I love what you said there, this idea that there's artists and there's people that want to appreciate the art and they're already there. You just sort of brought them together. You just kind of
Yeah.
caused that awareness to take place. It's really, it's a beautiful thing.
Well, and it's funny, the
Um,
next time you and I are in a theater together, And if you find me in the theater, you'll notice that I spend 10% of my time looking at the stage and
Hmm.
90% of the time looking back and watching how the energy is transferred from like that vibrancy, like how is the energy being received in the audience and how is it being returned? And what
Okay.
I love exactly what you just said. How does this energy and vibrancy happen between audience and artists?
That's really amazing because I think, for me, when we talk about, cultures of groups of people, whether it is of an organization or a community or a city or whatever, you can feel if the energy can move freely, then that's when the magic happens. When we say we have a positive culture or an engaged workplace or whatever, if it gets stuck on like passive aggressiveness or disagreements or things unsaid or
It's
whatever,
about
you can
people.
really feel it, right? Yeah.
It's about people. If you and I were in a concert and it was and I ask this question all the time, and by design it's a trick question. But the
Okay.
question is, what's more important, the intent of the artist or the perception of the audience?
Mm,
And that's a question that
interesting.
usually strikes hours of conversation because it's
Yeah.
about engagement. And what's more important? Is it what I'm putting out on stage or is it my ability to perceive? And the way that I usually translate that into concrete examples is if you and I go see a play, right? And there are 1,000 other people in the theater with us. It doesn't matter how great I think it is. If I look around me and everybody's on their phones, somewhere there's a disconnect.
Hmm.
And so to me, it's yes, artistic excellence is important, but the relevance of artistic excellence is lost when it is not put in front of the right people or when that match doesn't happen. And so we can't just focus on the artist's desire. We need to always, and we cannot be creating in a vacuum. We cannot be programming in a vacuum. We always need to be talking about who is this for and why should they care?
Hmm. Well, I really love the idea with art that it's not necessarily about like exactly what it is or isn't, but how does it make you feel when you see it?
Yeah.
And if I'm an audience member and I'm seeing something, a play, a production, a piece of art, and it's resonating with something I'm feeling, that means that exactly you've paired it up right. The artist is maybe feeling the same thing that I did and chose to express it, and you're kind of getting it in a way that maybe you hadn't thought to express yourself, I guess,
Yeah.
right?
And and not only is it the relationship between you and the artist, it's also the relationship between you and whoever's sitting next to you in response to the art form,
Hmm.
right? It's, I there was a mental health practitioner that I was speaking to a year ago in Calgary, and he said, "Listen, we've been watching Netflix more than like we have consumed more arts and culture via digital streaming than ever in the history of mankind, but we've been doing it in the privacy of our own homes, which means that we're sort of living in this echo chamber of our own biases."
Hmm.
And what he says, and like, because when I pick something to watch on Netflix, I'm not necessarily looking to challenge myself. I'm going to pick whatever I feel aligns with my values. Now, if you and I were sitting in a theater and if somebody says a line on stage and you and I are sitting next to each other and you laugh and I don't, mental health practitioners call that emotional referencing. And what emotional referencing is me sitting there thinking to myself, why did Adam laugh and I didn't?
Hmm.
The second I ask that question, emotional referencing starts happening and my brain starts firing in different ways. And emotional referencing is literally what leads to building empathy. Why did Adam laugh and I didn't? Or why did Alex cry at that line and I didn't? All of a sudden, I'm asking that question and I'm experiencing that question in a way that builds empathy, which is literally to imagine yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Hmm.
And I can't think of a more urgent time for empathy than right now.
Absolutely. And I love that idea of, it makes me think of the laugh track, right? Why I
Yeah,
use laugh tracks on shows, right?
yeah,
Because it's contagious, and if I picture, maybe not necessarily an artistic environment, but let's say a business environment or some sort of collaborative environment, it's kind of very similar. It's the same thing. If other people are engaged, then you naturally want to be part of it, right?
yeah.
You don't want to be left out. It's contagious.
But it also challenges power dynamics,
Mhm.
right? Because if you're Arts Commons, or if you're the boss, or like whatever level of authority we think we might be in, if we are in service to others, if Arts Commons is in service to Calgary, if my job is to be in service of my staff who are amazing and it's my job to support them, all of a sudden we've shifted the power dynamic so that it's not about this top-down mentality of like, oh, you should come see this because Arts Commons says it's good. No, you come see it because you want to see it and you think it'll resonate with you. It's this idea of how can I be in service to you, or what, or is such a beautiful question, because if asked by the right people, it challenges the status quo of power dynamic, and it actually it I think it starts breaking down these systems
Hmm.
that have been so entrenched in talking about engagement as this one-way street.
Right. No, that's that. I love that notion of thinking about it as a power differential and evening that out. But I
Yeah.
mean, there's so many challenges, right? People are tricky. We can build these systems or have these ideas, but as soon as we add people to the mix, it's sometimes who knows what's going to happen. Um,
Let's imagine that you and I worked at Nike together and our job was to design sneakers,
okay.
right? You and I don't get to decide what the sneaker looks like and then put it out to market and just cross our fingers. Like, the consumer holds the power.
Hmm.
That's why you have focus groups, and that's why you test the heck out of that sneaker to see if it'll resonate with market. So why is it that corporate Canada or corporate America has figured out that you can't sell a product to consumers that don't want it? So this is not rocket science.
Hmm.
Why do we in the arts, or why do we sometimes within our own lives? I'm not suggesting we should all be like corporate America, but why can't we in our own lives sometimes open ourselves up to the idea that we might be wrong, or if I don't surround myself with the right people, then what do I know? So
Hmm.
it's who are we doing this for, and how are we letting ourselves be informed by their lived experiences?
I love it. I mean, that's in its essence, that's the beautiful question, right?
Yeah,
Why not?
why not?
Exactly. Um, and I find it really interesting. If you were to challenge somebody with that, they, I'm sure, couldn't come up with a good answer as to why not. Um, so as we're going forward, as we're moving into the coming year, I know you've got probably ideas upon ideas of exciting things that you're going to try and do and keep asking these beautiful questions and bringing people together and try and ignite that fire of empathy. Do you have any plans or things you want to
Oh,
share with us or ideas?
we have so many big plans for 2023, not the least of which is the fact that this fall we will be unveiling to the public, to Calgary, the designs for our new expanded Arts Commons. Um, and just, so and your audience knows, um, this is the single largest cultural infrastructure project in Canada. It's a $500 million project that will expand Arts Commons into a new facility across the street, and will gut renovate our current facility. Um, and the project is called Arts Commons Transformation, because we are truly transforming who we are. But what I love about your question and the conversation we're having is that this transformation isn't a physical transformation. It's
Mhm.
very easy for people to think about, oh, Arts Commons transformation is the color of the building, or the font on the logo. And what I love about the work that we're doing this year, and mind you, it's been 10 years in the making, so we've been very busy behind the scenes. But what I love about this is that the building, what we are designing, is the physical manifestation of the organization we want to become. And so the transformation isn't physical. The transformation is philosophical. The transformation is programmatic. The transformation is deeply emotional. And so we've been engaging a lot of artists from marginalized communities around Calgary that have been historically felt excluded from this downtown art scene. We are engaging a group of Indigenous elders on an ongoing basis. We're actually working on a reconciliation strategy with a lot with a lot of Indigenous elders. We also have, as part of our design team, the first Indigenous woman in Canada to ever become an architect. So she's bringing into her design a huge commitment to Indigenous aesthetic, Indigenous consensus building. So how are we bringing these communities together? Not just the communities that Arts Commons has always had relationships with, but I think most importantly, the communities that we've never had relationships with, and say, what does this need to look like for you to feel like you have a vested interest in the future of Calgary? So it's a big year. We're going to unveil the design. We're going to unveil a lot of the strategy behind it. And so I'm really excited about that.
That's, that's that's really cool. I love the idea, I think sometimes with cultural transformation that we as people need something tangible to grasp onto, like a building expansion,
Yeah.
right? But you're almost doing like a double take, right? Like it's not a trick, but you're really the
I'm being
switch and
sneaky. Yeah.
yeah, you're sneaking it in there before you know it. You think you're working on a building, but actually you're working on a community or a philosophy or a way of thinking, and you come out the
Well,
other end changed,
yeah.
right?
Well, because at the end of the day, if Calgary is not excited for this, then what's the point?
Hmm.
And one of the things that when we were looking for a design team and we put out the RFP, the big question was, how do you design something of and for Calgary while at the same time pushing the boundaries on who we can become? Because what I really didn't want is I didn't want a starchitect firm that does a lot of design for competitions to just say, here's what we think it could look like. Because then what you're saying to me is, you could drop that building in Calgary, Toronto, New York, Mexico City, and it doesn't make a difference. What I really love about this process is, how are we getting to know Calgary? How are we getting to know the ambitions of who we want to become? And the fact that we're going through a huge identity crisis is actually really exciting as a city, because we get to sort of build accordingly. And so yeah, it's terrifying, but it's also exciting.
I love it, right? Change is scary, but sometimes we
Yeah.
got to be pushed in that direction, kicking and screaming, and we're happy it happened at the end of it, right?
Well, listen, change is going to happen one way or another. We're either a part of it or we're not.
Right? There
Yeah.
you go. So, there's Alex Sarian from Arts Commons asking the beautiful questions. We've got some great, amazing things coming up. And I just want to really say thank you, Alex, for sharing your insights and your beautiful vision with us, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Adam, for hosting this conversation.
Hey, thanks for watching The Culture Hack. Do you want to chat culture and engagement? Give us a call and come on the show.